Debauchery at Atari. Atari's dark moments. I remember some of Atari's great moments of debauchery. Debauchery describes them quite well, I think. While at one consumer electronics show, CES, in Las Vegas, we were staying at the Sands Hotel, which coincidentally was hosting an alternative lifestyle and adult film industry event and expo. Sure, maybe it was a coincidence, but you will think maybe it was intentional when you hear the rest of my stories of debauchery. During another CES, a game tester that came to the event to demo games on the showroom floor, he came up to me and said, "We are all going to meet with Hideo Nakajima," that was the president of Atari at the time, "to go to the Chicken Ranch." The so-called Chicken Ranch was the colloquial name for a house of prostitution that was located just outside the Las Vegas city limits, because prostitution was apparently illegal in Las Vegas, the city, but was completely legal just outside its city limits. Well, in general, I considered it potentially inappropriate for anyone to participate in paid-for relations. But I also believed, like Cervantes wrote in Don Quixote, that professional escorts and service providers are okay, so long as their calling is entirely elective and explicitly uncoerced. Moreover, for me, I was in a committed relationship. I am honorable and loyal. I believed it was unacceptable to participate in any such thing, and it was definitely inappropriate and rude for them to even ask me to go to such a place of prostitution and of debauchery. Debauchery was infused in Atari's culture. It was evident in the hotels its management chose to stay at, in the bonus activities like offers to go to the Chicken Ranch and gamble with free cash, off-site events with illicit drugs and booze available 24/7, legal fees and private settlements to cover up and bury things for high-performing, valued employees, and so much more. Over time, people started calling me Grandpa Richard because I did not engage in Atari's partying lifestyle. I did not participate in its off-sites or its conference conventions experiences. No, I just did my job. I championed integrity and clarity of purpose. While I considered myself to be the moral compass and backbone of Atari Tengen, the consumer division, they seemed to see me more as a fuddy-duddy that stayed clear of partiers like a grandfather. Just because I was not into drinking booze excessively, using recreational drugs, or going to the Chicken Ranch in Vegas with Atari Japanese president Hideo Nakajima like so many others, they declared I was Grandpa. Well, I consider the title of Grandpa then to be a compliment to my integrity and my firmly holding to my true beliefs. My grandfather held high integrity. It was fine being a grandpa. Atari Games was a company of extraordinary people that came together to create and do extraordinary things. The culture was one of passion and of excitement. Nothing was impossible, and everyone should be compensated highly for their genius. Darn it. Indeed, Atari engineers and artists and designers and producers, everyone, were paid handsomely in salary, but excessively in bonuses. One artist I knew, Alan Murphy, who later in my career would work with me on my game Prophecy, The Fall of Trinidad, another game of mine, Peter Pan and the Pirates, and my game Escape from Hell. He was paid over $30,000 most every quarter as bonuses for the game Gauntlet that he had worked on. While it was a great income for a graphic artist in the era, it paled in comparison to engineers' bonuses. One engineer boasted, Tim Crossman, that he had earned nearly $300,000 every quarter for more than a year. That's right, he earned over $1 million in just 1 year, and it kept coming. You might ask yourself, why were these people paid so much money in bonuses? Well, Atari had a bonus system whereby each project was allocated a percentage of net game sales to be distributed to the development team. It was split apart them, and then some to the marketing team and some to the sales team. But the engineers got the lion's share at Atari. But everyone got something who was involved, even human resources. Now, that might sound very egalitarian. Like I said, it was not at all. Engineers got the most, by a lot. The project lead, always a senior engineer with a penchant for leadership, would be the person to propose the division, the allocation of the bonus monies. And then the vice president, Steve Calfee, would approve it. It was very simple. The project lead was to determine how critical each person was, not what work they did, but how special their contribution was. The lead was supposed to determine if the person had talents that were unique and should be kept in the company. You want to retain those people by giving them the most money. Even central teams that offered tools or anything would receive 1, maybe 2 percentage points split among them. Generally, everyone got something if they were involved with a game and its release. While Atari Coin-Op was minting cash and paying insanely high bonuses to its staff, the consumer division teams did not benefit nearly as much because the home consumer market was still small, albeit it was growing quickly. And so its bonuses, also based on the same royalty system, were correspondingly based on smaller money. Tengen later renamed itself to Time Warner Interactive from Atari Games. Tengen was formed as a legally separate corporate entity to avoid legal entanglements with its former half, which following a messy lawsuit separated it from Atari Games and Atari Corp. They became 2 companies out of Atari. Sega of America suffered under its Genesis launch leadership, starting with its head of development, Ken Balthaser. Ken's producers and teams were all in over their heads. They were trying to launch the Sega Genesis in America and had no idea what they were doing. But despite Sega's bad executive team and being late to market, the Sega Genesis was ultimately successful. It could have been much more successful, and Sega of Japan knew it. Sega of Japan replaced much of Sega of America's leadership team in hopes of improving their console's investment return over time. Sega began by signing deals with quality game developers, and were prepared to pay premium rates to get the best game creators working for them, exclusively if possible. Sega was on the rise with its Genesis, and was quickly becoming a serious rival to Nintendo. Seeing my old way of life as a contractor being viable again, and being frustrated with Atari Games not paying consumer division staff as well as the company was compensating its coin-operated arcade game developers, I decided, one morning, I had received a phone call from a producer at Sega of America. He had heard that I might be looking for something outside Atari. My disappointment had spread, apparently. With my disappointment in my compensation inequity and an opportunity to return to contracting, my interest was piqued. Within a few weeks, Sega offered me a lucrative contract to deliver a Sega Genesis game that I would design myself and develop entirely independently, with Sega publishing the game as a first-party Sega title. I had an awesome contract with Sega of America. Timing, however, was not ideal when I learned of my contract offer from Sega of America. I was actually attending the Consumer Electronics Show, CES, in Las Vegas as an Atari Games employee. Although attending conventions was seen as a perk, I always saw it as work. I had to work the booth, talk to press, deal with consumers, etc. I could not find the vice president that I reported to, Steve Calfee, though I had my offer in hand and I wanted to accept it. And so I informed the consumer division director, Bill Hindorf, of my resignation. He told me that he did not want to accept my resignation letter himself, and that I should give it only to Steve Calfee since he was my direct manager. Bill returned to me later in the day on the show floor and told me that VP of Development Steve Calfee and President Dan Van Alderen and VP of Marketing Ted Hoff and CFO, who is also Atari's chief attorney, would all like to meet me for breakfast. That was all of the top brass that wanted to meet me. Due to the executives' already established packed schedules, they would meet me at 6 a.m. for breakfast at the Treasure Island Casino to discuss my resignation from Atari. It was surreal. There it was, Vice President of Consumer Development Steve Calfee, praising my amazing engineering and problem-solving talents. Division Director Bill Hindorf, also in attendance, said that he had never known anyone as fast or as insightful as I was in coding. Vice President of Marketing Ted Hoff extolled my design and leadership skills beyond engineering. And President Dan Van, as he president preferred to be called, was sickeningly sweet and complimentary. He was ordinarily intimidating and not so dripping sweet, but he was clearly employing his sweet manipulation technique to gain my trust. But I had worked with all of these people, and I knew their methods and their techniques. But I also knew they were good, well-intentioned at their core, even if their ethics were somewhat situational and fungible. When I first learned the phrase situational ethics, I was struck with how ironic it was. Ethics, which should represent integrity, could change based on the situation. Apparently, in business, ethical decisions are different than personal decisions. It might be okay to harm people to benefit the people in your business or town or country. Of course, you would never harm your immediate people in your family or your village, friends, anybody in your country. So it was confusing and conflicting. It is okay to hurt people outside of your clan if it benefits the group in your clan. The key was you help people in your clan and you don't care about people outside of your clan. So situational ethics sounded more like an excuse to do bad things to people that were not you or your clan. It justified making decisions for business or government or mobs to do whatever they wanted. I abhorred the idea that integrity, ethics, and morality were malleable, fungible, situational things. That cannot be true. Ethics and integrity are not situational unless you are evil. Dan Van did teach me something very constructive. I learned a technique to deliver unpleasant information in a palatable way from Dan Van, which I later coined to people as the sandwich. The sandwich concept is simple. It seeks to make unpleasant information palatable by combining the negativity with positivity in hopes of canceling out adverse reactions to the message. The sandwich premise remains the same whether spoken or written. Open with a compliment, then reveal the meat, negative message, new tasks, assignments, whatever. And then close with praise, often related to the benefit of overcoming that negative meat. The sandwich is not dissimilar to wrapping a pill in meat or cheese or bread or a treat to encourage a pet to take its medicine. The same idea was here with the sandwich. Wrap the medicine meat message with tasty bread compliments. And there was the CFO and chief attorney at that breakfast table. He was clearly operating more as an attorney than financial officer in this meeting. He asked me with a cold glare, So Richard, if your contract that you think you have was canceled, would you want to remain working for us at Atari? His question felt threatening. I tensed up a bit, and I think my body language probably appeared hostile. The lawyer saw his approach was a mistake, and he shifted his pitch. I mean, Richard, we would like to offer you a promotion, a raise, and a bonus. We were already planning it all, but this contract thing you had just threw a wrench in our plans. So we're offering it to you now. Would you consider staying with us and taking our offer, and not taking the contract with Sega? He queried. Well, I was not expecting their offer. They didn't have any details in it either. They could just give me $1 raise and $1 bonus and call me an executive doofus janitor. Nothing they said was actually a commitment at all. I figured asking point blank for specifics, I could make an informed decision instead of an emotional one. And so I challenged. What kind of bonus are you talking about? How much of a raise? And what title would I have? I was surprised. There was a fast and immediate answer. They did have a plan. The CFO/attorney answered, $35,000 cash bonus, $17,000 raise, any title you want, just tell us. It's just got to be corporate company appropriate. Well, that was a good deal, considering as an employee, I would be able to earn all that they offered ongoing as a salary, all without needing to go looking for contracts. And I still did worry that contract development could yet fade away, even if it had not yet faded as I previously speculated. I told the executive breakfast club that I accepted their terms, but only if Sega canceled my contract because I signed it and my honor necessitated that I follow through with it. Dan Van smiled. No problem, Richard. I will look into the contract for you. We have a deal, right? I replied, yes. I felt a bit like I was making a deal with the devil right then. He was so direct. But it was all crazy and scary and very complimentary. It was tough to process everything and map out where my career was going, what might happen, what my choices might represent. Atari Games delivered everything they offered, so I have nothing negative to say about that experience in the end. The Monday following my return from the Consumer Electronics Show, CES, my phone rang. It was the producer from Sega of America, Ed Annunziata, who had offered me the contract development deal that I had now turned down. Ed said firmly and slowly and clearly, Richard, I am here with the Sega of Japan director that oversees American operations. Our president and every vice president and director from Sega of America is in my office with me right now. I'm going to read something to you, okay? He did not wait for an answer. I am ashamed. We are ashamed. We should not have offended you or our friends at Atari by extending a contract offer to you. It was shameful. We betrayed you and our friends at Atari. I am sorry. We are sorry. Apparently, he was reading from his notes. There was a pause and a chorus of, I am so sorry, ringing through the phone. There was another pause, and Ed resumed speaking. What the F, Richard? I mean, we had a deal. Then I get a call from the president of Sega of Japan saying that I must immediately cancel the contract and talk to the Japanese director running our operations here in America. I don't know who the heck you are outside and your reputation. You must walk on water or something. code like a god, to have people call across the ocean, to direct presidents, to direct major companies to cancel your contract and apologize to you. What the heck? I was almost speechless. I don't know what to say. That sounds crazy. Well, Ed cut me off. Dude, I get it. You're amazing. They love you. They have crazy close relationships with Japan and their executives, I guess. They just killed the deal. For me, it's over. It's not worth it. Good luck, dude. You're not working with me again. And he hung up. I never heard from Ed Annunziata again. Well, I stayed with Atari Games this time. I would resign 3 total times before I really left Atari Games employment to join Mindscape to rescue Chessmaster. More on that story later. So, there was Atari then, and there was Atari Games, coin-op arcade games and consumer video games maker and publisher, and Atari Corp, video game console maker and consumer video game maker and publisher. They might sound quite similar. Atari split into 2 separate companies with entirely independent staff, management, bank accounts, etc. They were entirely separate from each other legally and were owned by different entities. The intended split of market ownership was Atari Corp owned consumer hardware and Atari Games owned arcade hardware. Both Ataris could make games. Unfortunately, the 2 Ataris fought and litigated over who had the rights over which Atari intellectual properties, aka who owned what games, could be sold to consumers and which ones could be sequeled, and what should be Atari branded versus something else. It turned out the split was not so black and white as originally envisioned. The trust in each other disintegrated when big money in the consumer market was becoming clear. In fact, the consumer market slowly began to overtake the coin-op market. Atari Corp had not made much money on its Atari ST computers, or its new home video game consoles, like the Atari Jaguar. The Atari Jaguar did so poorly, in fact, that they creatively made it into an arcade black box called the Kojag that could be swapped inside coin-op arcade machines with new game cartridges. It was a good idea, but it came too late. So let me summarize that. Giant game cartridges were put inside arcade machines so that they could just be swapped out easily, along with big artwork on the side of the cabinet. That would just make a new game and the consumer wouldn't know the difference. It was a great idea, but it came too late. The coin-op market was already fading fast. Atari Corp never recovered, and Atari Games struggled. The fight was on over the living room gaming experience. Atari Games formed Tengen to avoid the legal ambiguity of what games it could develop under the Atari name. Tengen formally licensed games from Atari coin-op, and they paid a royalty back to Atari Games, or even to Atari Corp, if they actually owned the IP game rights. It all made sense in the end. That was why Tengen was downstream from the epicenter of Atari Games, a coin-operated stand-up arcade company. Tengen was formed as a separate legal company to run in parallel to Atari Games. Some might even argue the real reason that Tengen was formed was entirely to bypass Atari Corp. All so they could make consumer games without scrutiny or limitation. Atari wanted to make games on the Nintendo Entertainment System, NES, but did not want to pay Nintendo what it considered an extortion royalty through an exorbitant distribution, security, and manufacturing licensing fee. And so, much like finding ways around Atari Corp, they sought ways around Nintendo.